I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today on this Friday. We'll get to some great Johnny Cash music here in just a moment because it's Johnny Cash Friday, day where we try to listen to as much Johnny Cash music as we can, while at the same time peppering in the news and events of the day. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. If you would like to contribute to the conversation today, you can call or text also, sound off, facebook.com/Conduit News. Also head over to the YouTube channel and subscribe there and click the little bell to receive notifications. Yesterday was the 75th anniversary of D-Day. The 75th anniversary of D-Day, President Trump in Normandy commemorating this event where men, dare I say in this day and age, real men, were courageous. Most of them had accepted, if not all, that they were going to die that day. And so for the cause of humanity, took to the beaches of Normandy. This is President Trump, the beginning of his speech, addressing this, talking about, again, the 75 years ago yesterday, one of the most, if not the most, important military battles of our time happened. Listen to this.
President Macron, Mrs. Macron, and the people of France, to the First Lady of the United States and members of the United States Congress, to distinguished guests, veterans, and my fellow Americans, we are gathered here on freedom's altar, on these shores, on these bluffs, on this day 75 years ago. 10,000 men shed their blood and thousands sacrificed their lives for their brothers, for their countries, and for the survival of liberty. Today we remember those who fell and we honor all who fought right here in Normandy. They won back this ground for civilization to more than 170 veterans of the Second World War who join us today. You are among the very greatest Americans who will ever live. You are the pride of our nation. You are the glory of our republic. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
The glory of the republic. Now, stop. President Trump did an excellent job in that speech and that delivery. Matter of fact, by all accounts, even the liberal media over at MSNBC praised the president for his remarks. But, of course, they couldn't leave it at that. So because the president had a good day yesterday, I mean, according to their ever-evolving moral standards, whatever outrage the media has in any given day, they have to adjust or recalibrate their morality and they act like that it's never changed, but it's like a wheel. They have to adjust the wheel, recalibrate the wheel of morality, and now they have a new facade, and they present it to the people as this is what you should be outraged about. So what should you be outraged? President Trump has a good day, but what should you be outraged about? Well, while he was in Normandy, he sat down with Fox News' Laura Ingraham, and it is an outrage. Jake Tapper triggered by this. Let's play this video. This is headline Breitbart.com. Jake Tapper of CNN accuses Trump of not fully comprehending the sacred ground where he stood for Fox News D-Day interview. This is a little bit from Jake Tapper, CNN, and he was triggered by Laura Ingraham in Donald Trump's interview. Listen.
Wrong. Here's President Trump just yards away from the graves of American heroes, asked by his favorite channel about special counsel Robert Mueller, who is, not incidentally, a veteran of the Vietnam War, awarded a Bronze Star for valor.
Do you mind if he testifies still? Before you said you didn't care. Mueller testified.
Let me tell you. He made such a fool out of himself the last time because what people don't report is the letter he had to do to straighten out his testimony, because his testimony was wrong.
Stop.
It's not exactly clear what Trump was talking.
He goes on, and it's not clear what he's talking about. He's talking about the press conference, dummy. But anyway, so Jake Tapper just can't believe it. Now all of a sudden, the media, they are now the authority on honoring the troops. Just so you know, this is exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, okay, so for today, Jake Tapper and CNN are the ultimate authority on what is the proper etiquette when it comes to honoring troops, what is the proper etiquette when it comes to specifically honoring Normandy and D-Day and the 75th, specifically the 75th year anniversary. They have now recalibrated, and this is their outrage of the day, because they masquerade as essentially somehow, moral authority that can, absolve or condemn you of your sins. That is what the mainstream media does today. That's what CNN does. That's what MSNBC does. Because the fact of the matter is, they can't stand when the troops have the little make the Air Force great again, right? Oh, no, we don't want to revere our troops then, right? Or the troops when Trump visits and they take their MAGA hats off and they ask, President, will you sign? Oh, they shouldn't be. That's a violation of protocol. Those military scum. I mean, this is. See, it just depends. It depends on what the outrage is. It depends on what they're trying to accomplish. President has a great speech. Now we've got to trash him for it. And it just turns my stomach, and I wanted to point it out to you because I don't even know that there's anybody that's going to point out specifically what I'm doing right now. And just so you know, President Donald Trump, I think in response to this bogus fake news, he just tweeted out an interview of him and Laura Ingraham, and this was another part of the interview where it did take. By the way, are we in a day and age where you want a politician to be asked the question and then not answer it? You ask President Trump anywhere on the planet about something that's in the news, something, he's going to answer your question because he's a straight shooter in terms of wanting to engage with people who are asking him something and want to engage with him. Listen to this. President Trump tweeted this interview from Laura Ingraham. Go ahead.
You're going to take back home after this day and your meeting with the Queen, trip to Ireland?
Well, first of all, the meeting with the Queen was incredible. I think I can say I really got to know her because I sat with her many times, and we had automatic chemistry. You understand that feeling. It's a good feeling, but she's a spectacular woman. And the people I met so many veterans, and we're talking about people that have seen it. They've seen days like nobody else, and they are just really incredible people.
And feeling this beautiful weather, was raining last night, the weather broke. Imagining the invasion, 150,000 Allied troops climbing the cliffs, landing on these shores. What's going through your mind?
Well, this is weather like they don't normally have. You know, this was supposed to be today, a storm, and it's a little like the invasion itself. The weather was a big factor, and they delayed it a day, and it worked out okay. And you look at the weather we have beautiful weather. And it's been this way wherever I've been. And I mean, we've been now for 3.5 days, and It's like, I'm saying, is it always like this? It's pretty beautiful, but it can be pretty rough.
After having met all of these World War II veterans, this entire experience here today, what do you tell the American people about the importance of this history and our shared ideals?
That there was never a more important battle, there was never a more important event than the event 75 years ago today. Think of that. These were incredible, brave people who were just being blown up, and you have the graves all over. I mean, these were people that knew they were going to die. It was horrendous. The bravery, the valor. We're giving out medals today. You know, we're giving out medals to certain people and to certain families. This was one of the true, in terms of war, in terms of, probably you could also say in terms of peace, because this led to something very special. This was a very, very horrific day, but it was also a very special day, and it's an honor to be here.
Of course, just so you know, after this in the interview, he gets a question about Nancy Pelosi, gets a question about Robert Mueller, and he answers them, and that is what Jake Tapper, again, the essential, basically a news priest. Yeah, pillar of reality, news priest. He can absolve you or condemn you, depending on, you know, his capricious, ever-evolving nature of morality. Anyway. He was upset that Trump answered questions about Nancy and Robert Mueller and the like. I just had to get that off my chest. It's maddening. Now, let's take a different approach about the 75-year anniversary of D-Day in light of Gillette commercials. Now, Gillette, right? The best a man can get. Remember, they came out with razor ads, and they were essentially decrying toxic masculinity, meaning like all men are bad. You need to break up fights. Like it's like any man wants, like, oh yeah, just let them fight it out. I mean, you know, adults are going to step in, but you understand. Do you remember how demeaning it was towards men because we're told that the patriarchy is the problem? The patriarchy is what secured your freedom. I'm just going to say it, okay? A traditional, you know, and you can't, how you even say traditional at this point. I'm just pretty sure the men who are on those the men who are on those amphibious boats, I'm pretty sure those guys would be considered toxic in our society today. Toxic masculinity, don't you think? Sebastian Gorka says that political correctness blocks today's Eisenhowers and Pattons and Bradleys from rising. Today's political correctness, I'm not even sure if this battle could be fought today. Think about that. Could this battle, you take away all of our technological advances, you take away you know, the nuclear threat, the nuclear deterrent, mutually assured destruction, you take away all of that we have today, but you just give us the social situation that we have today, would we be willing to trade our lives so that the next generation would be free? Do you think we are willing? Now, we've got great men and women in uniform. Now, I'm talking about the scale of it. I'm talking about what is an acceptable loss of life today? What is an acceptable loss of life? I mean, you look how we built this country, right? You look how we built this country. You had men, you know, they were building skyscrapers in the major cities, and the acceptable death count of people falling to their deaths, how it was acceptable. Or you look at the space program. The amount of lives that you would lose just trying to get to space. Today, with OSHA regulations or whatever else, it's like, no, we can't accept that at all, right? Look at the outrage. Look at the death toll from the Iraq War. Look at the death toll from Afghanistan versus the death toll of Vietnam or World War II, and look at the outrage. Remember the media back in the Bush administration, how outraged they were. But my point is, we don't have the stomach for it the way we used to. And the question is, why? Are we more afraid of death? Yeah, because we forced God out of public life, and you don't really. There's not as much blessed assurance out there. I mean, certainly itself hasn't diminished, but you get my point, right? You certainly have that. You have a loss of values. You have people that don't really even understand the benefits of their freedom until it's gone. So they don't understand that the natural tendency of men is to try to rule over and take from others and oppress other people. I mean, we're talking about people that knew what it was, who were there to fight the oppressor. You want to talk about victim and oppressor in our society today? We've completely corrupted the idea. The men on those boats at D-Day were actually there to fight an oppressor. That is what an oppressor looks like. Listen to this. This is from Matt Walsh. He writes an article over at the Daily Wire. Headline, When Toxic Masculinity Saved the World. And it's extremely good. Hang on a second. I had the spot I was going to read from. It was one of the most impressive military campaigns the world has ever seen. Put yourselves in the boots of these men for a moment. Imagine crouching in one of those landing crafts, jostling up and down from the breaking waves, listening to the rapid pops and bangs of machine guns and grenade launchers, knowing that you will be charging into that hell the moment the door opens and the whistle blows. Imagine jumping into the water and trudging through that sand as your friend gets blown to bits all around you. Imagine fighting Nazis, real Nazis. Not just someone whose opinion you find disagreeable. A real fighting, not an angry tweet or a hashtag campaign. Imagine sailing across an ocean to die for someone else's freedom. Matt Walsh goes on, there is much that can be said about the men who entered that war with a bang, with many bangs, on this day 3/4 of a century ago. But one thing we must surely say about them is that they were men. Real men. Men who did what men must do and what only men can do. Men who showed us then and still show us today what it means to be a man. We hear a lot about toxic masculinity in these times, he writes. I've never quite nailed down the definition of the term, which is probably because there is no definition. It is an ambiguous catch-all phrase used basically by misandrists and self-loathing men to shame men simply for being men. If it were not meant to shame men, then you would expect to hear these same people sometimes warn about the dangers of toxic femininity. But you never hear such a thing. The word toxic is only ever affixed to male traits, and that is not an accident. So we are left to surmise a vague definition of the ambiguous term. It seems that toxic masculine men are those men who are aggressive, violent, hard, and tough, men who do not talk much about their feelings or strive to get in touch with them. I don't really like to talk about I'm maybe more than the average person because I'm a talk radio host, but I'll talk about my feelings with my wife, but maybe just not, the average stranger. Men who might be known on occasion to spit and cuss and make crude jokes. Men who do the dirty work. Men who put action over feeling. Men who would not be considered enlightened or progressive by our modern standards. Well, 24,000 of those kinds of men went charging into a hurricane of bullets and blood yesterday, 75 years ago. They went all that way to die or kill, or both. These were violent men, rough men, toxic at least to those who oppress the innocent and oppress freedom. Again, Matt Walsh over at the Daily Wire. Do we have the same moral courage that we had then? You know the answer is no. Not as many men. Not as many. And we've got great men and women in our armed forces today who do understand what it takes, but not as many. Not as many. And the answer, why is it? Slow moral decay of our society from within. That's what it is. We're going to take a break, and we're going to reset here. 870-275-9799 is the telephone number. It is Johnny Cash Friday. We've got a great show for you. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, State Representative Spencer Hawks. Then at the top of the next hour, we'll be talking with Jonesboro City Councilman Bobby Long about a sales tax increase that's supposed to be coming down the pike. And then we'll do an impression of the session with Arkansas talk radio host of the Dave Ellswick Show, Mr. Dave Ellswick. Back in just a moment. We've been doing these segments called Impression of the Session. We're doing a lot of them. Here now, welcome, State Representative Aaron Pilkington is on the line from District 69. Aaron, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Before we get into your impression of the session, I'm just going to give you the floor and let you take it wherever you want to go. But can you tell us about how your community's doing? Are you guys staying dry? How's the flooding in your area?
So we've been pretty lucky here in Johnson County. We've had a few areas flood down to Heartland Bottoms. We've had some issues, but I mean, compared to some of the other counties around us, we're doing fairly well. And I have to give a lot of credit to Jess Johnson, our emergency director. He has been doing a fantastic job, and I know he's been working hard, making sure our county's taken care of, and then even helping assist other counties like Polk County. And so I just, we luckily, like I said, we've been very fortunate, and at the same time, we've had a great crew here that's been helping out with our area and surrounding area.
Good. That's good to hear. Well, let's just let me give you the floor. You take it where you want to go. State Representative Arian Pilkington, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Well, my impression of the session for 2019 was, I kind of jokingly refer to it as the eating the vegetables session. There's a lot of good legislation that happened. I think caught national headlines, but things I think that were good to kind of make the state better. But at the same time, I mean, there was a lot of things I think that I wish hadn't happened. I just wish we would have done a few things differently. And but being one of 100, you can just say your piece and move on with that. I will say, and healthcare is my specialty, and in the realm of healthcare, I think we've done a lot of good things to try to move the state forward. I saw a lot of good legislation to try to use technology to help cut healthcare costs here in Arkansas, and us being an innovative state in that way. I had a bill that allowed us to create a pilot program to use ride sharing like Uber and Lyft, take people to the doctor instead of having to pay these large contracts to companies that do transportation that cost a lot of money. Things like that, I think that help us save money, but at the same time, make sure that people get the care they need is an important step for the state.
Did you get pushback on that piece of legislation?
In the beginning, we did. We got some pushback, but eventually we were able to kind of overcome it because the way that we worked with a few of the other current companies, we just said, this isn't. We just wanted to make sure there's no. Let's just add the tool to the toolbox, kind of as we said. So I mean, hopefully, our Medicaid program will realize this is a cheaper option, and then exclusively go with that in areas where they can go with it. But just not completely eliminating those right now was a way to kind of ease into that reform. But I mean, of course, there's always pushback. Anytime anyone has a contract with a government agency, I mean, they're not going to let that slip away from them that easily.
Yeah. This was also a big session for you. I mean, it's personal, but you got married this session, didn't you?
I did, yes.
Congratulations.
I was a crazy guy. Thank you. I was a crazy guy who got married during the middle of session. So that was pretty interesting, but it was great. Representative Justin Boyd and Representative Austin McCollum, they actually spoke in my wedding and read from.
All right, ladies and gentlemen,
welcome
back to the program. All right, if you want your meme of the day, or you want to submit a meme of the day, if you guys find a meme of the day, you want to send it to us, you can text it 870-275-9799. Or for a candidate, we'll announce that meme of the day coming up at 7:50, somewhere around 7:50 this morning. We always like to do that. We've had some good ones. Matter of fact, some of the most popular Facebook posts of the week, because we repost them as soon as we get off the program. Twitter at Conduit News, Facebook.com/Conduit News. We put that meme right back up there. So coming up, we'll do an impression of the session with State Representative Spencer Hawks again, and also we'll have Councilman Bobby Long talking about this. For those of you who don't know, across the state, we covered the Fort Smith tax increase that failed. For the Marshall Museum. We've covered others as well. Well, on the other side of the state, Jonesboro's trying to raise the sales tax as well. And they're going to have a special election, because that's the right thing to do, right? it's not an emergency, but we want to get what we want, so we'll do it in a special election where we know we have a better than 70% chance, statistically, since 1980, you've got a 70% chance of passing a tax increase in a special election. It's below 50% if you would just do it in a primary or a general election, and they know this. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Just a moment.
Some of my good colleagues there to celebrate that day with me. And, yeah, it was great. But my wife, she's amazing and a good conservative. She worked for Fox Business before moving down here to Arkansas. And so went to Hillsdale. And
nice.
So she's a true believer.
Well, so, and I want to remind everybody that, because I asked you about this. I was like, I saw you the next week. I was like, hey, what are you doing here? And you were like, well, we're not. We postponed the honeymoon until the session's over. So I will want everybody to know you didn't get married and then gallivant off somewhere. You put your honeymoon on hold, and so that's the price of public service, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. I told make sure a lot of people knew that I got married on a Saturday, so I flew up there Thursday night, and then got married, and then we were back in my seat the next week. And then, yeah, like I said, we decided to postpone our honeymoon, and luckily my wife was fine with that. She understood. I mean, she understands, that this is public service, and that this is just kind of a sacrifice you have to make. And but I got elected to do a job for the people, and I think me missing a week or two to go gallivant around somewhere else wouldn't be a good way to show my voters, how much respect they gave me the opportunity to be down there.
Well, we're talking with State Representative Aaron Pilkington, and I want to talk about some of your no votes on tax increases. SB 336, you voted no to provide additional revenue for the maintenance and repair of highways. This was a $95 million revenue increase that starts collection in October, going to cost people 3 cents more at the pump, 6 cents for diesel. And then a no vote to continue the levy of the 0.5% sales tax, which is going to be a massive tax increase if the voters vote for it. So what was your reasoning, Aaron, for voting against these bills to raise revenue from the people? And how did you stand up to some of their arguments? Because I know there was a big push to get Republicans to support it.
Yeah. These were they really pushed hard, and these were the votes that were really difficult to make. I know, trucking being one of the large industries here in the state, I know that they really supported this. And, when you've got someone that uses the roads like this and realize that they're going to have to pay more too, saying that they want this, that's a compelling argument. But, ultimately think about what was best for my constituents. And, we're a low-income area. When I thought that this was going to be a lot of increases on how much that they're having to pay, and especially, too, when you're low income, a 3% increase in how much taxes really adds up, especially when you have such low disposable income. So those were kind of the reasons why I felt like it wasn't prudent for me to do it. And additionally, we had, I think Julie Mayberry was the one who had another plan to help with the raising funds in a different way that would have been more financially prudent. Yeah. And, we weren't able to hear that plan on the House floor, which was a shame. And so I think just, giving the House the ability to figure out which plan we, wanted and kind of letting them lay it out there what they think is going to work the best would have been the better way to do it. And so I think that would have just been probably a more fiscally conservative way to do it. And I'd say, too, it's always hard when you're voting against something like roads, which everyone uses, and everyone, generally is pretty popular with, using tax money to spend on that. But the reality is I just felt that we had spent a lot of money.
All right, welcome back to the program. Let me get to this comment here. I like this, Dennis on. So I was just saying that, look, we don't have as many people willing to make that sacrifice. That understand the benefits of freedom. For other people, that sort of thing. Pointing out that we do still have obviously people inside the military that believe that. But hey, Dennis on Facebook's calling me out saying, hey, how can Paul say that there are not as many? When we now have the largest, most massive standing army in the history of mankind? The percentages may be down on those who might be thought of equal in caliber to our military of the past. but the sheer numbers make up for that. Military bases, multiple bases, in more than 109 countries around the planet. Dennis, you make a good point. I'll concede that point in terms of, population increases and everything else. My original point, though, when it comes to society in and of itself, you know what I mean? And attitude, acceptance, how many lives as society are we willing to give up? That number is much lower than it used to be, right? Anyway, I appreciate that, though. I appreciate healthy skepticism. That's a very American attitude. Hey, we've been doing these segments called Impression of the Sessions. Please welcome on the program. We have State Representative Spencer Hawks on the line. Spencer, how are you this morning, sir?
Hey, Paul. Thank you very much for having me on. Doing well here. First, I want to lead off with a comment. As everybody well knows, that Faulkner County and Perry County partly underwater here in my district, and we had some issues with the levee last night. So I'm waiting on some updates for that.
Yeah.
I don't have what has happened through the night yet, but I am waiting on those. But please, for all your listeners, be in prayer for the folks in this area and all across the state. This has been a devastating past few weeks, and and I know you got some good prayerful listeners on your station as well, and I would just really covet those prayers at this time.
Absolutely. Yeah, we just don't understand. A lot of people think something like this will never happen to me, but I mean, when it happens, it's unreal, and people's lives are uprooted when they lose their homes, and that's what people are facing here: homes and property and everything else. So I totally agree, and so please be in prayer, folks, for all of Arkansas and our fellow Arkansans who are in the path of this water. Spencer, kind of the way these work is, I just kind of give you the floor, and then maybe we get to specifics later. So State Representative Spencer Hawks, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Well, of course, coming in as a freshman, I want to say, I think it was a fairly strong first session personally. I came in, I was the co-chair of the freshman caucus. Of course, they had a Democrat, and then they elected me as the Republican chair of that. And what that amounted to really was not only did I have to learn the process of filing bills and BLR, but I had to communicate that to my colleagues, and we scheduled folks to come in, from different departments and agencies to come in and talk to us and to basically say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're working on, and give everybody a general lay of the land. So that was one thing I was able to do, and I was glad to help some folks out there. I was also elected the deputy whip for the party, and so I worked with Brant Smith on that, and he was our party whip, and he did a phenomenal job. It was wonderful working with him there. He and I were together yesterday at a legislative audit education committee, and we developed a strong relationship, and so that was great. And then I passed 9 pieces of legislation that really made a difference. So I mean, as far as the session, those 3 points, I think that makes up for a pretty strong session there.
As a freshman, did you get the sense that you can't trust some of the bureaucrats? I mean, you have to do your due diligence to make sure they're telling the truth. And I know that's a broad brush, but you know what I mean. I mean, we hear a lot about people who really need to get their bearings on who they can trust and who they can't trust when it comes to asking questions of those who are unelected government officials.
I would just tell folks, if they're coming in at this point, check your facts. When somebody tells you something, may or may not be true, but it may be somebody's version of the truth, and kind of they're representing somebody. It's their agency, it's their client, it's their district, it's their fill out the facts. And I think that everybody that I've dealt with down there, and there are certain situations that I was in, and I look back and I think, yeah, that was a little bit different. I had a piece of legislation and had somebody work with me on it, and I got it back from BLR, and it was completely different than what I thought it should have been. I checked with them, and they said, well, this is what we were told it needed to be. And I said, no, let's scratch that and go back with my initial plan, changed it a little bit. And so, people down there, just double check, what you get. And actually, it was funny because I worked with Boise State last week, and I was talking to a BLR staffer, and I brought up that situation that I just alluded to, and she said, it is crazy how often that does happen, that, bills change, and a lot of times the sponsors don't know it or they don't pick up on it until a little bit later. And so let that be noted that I do read the bills. Yeah, you can rest easy. Spencer Hawks reads the bills. Check your facts, and that's business, that's life, and that's legislation.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about tax policy for a second. We had a lot of tax bills. One good one was standalone $95 million tax cut for top earners, bringing the rate eventually over the next couple of years from 6.9 to 5.9. So that's good, makes us more competitive. On the other hand, though, you had a lot of revenue takebacks from that point forward. You had the gas tax increase, which was going to translate to 3 cents and 6 cents at the pump, gas and diesel. Then you had a referral sending back to the voters something that's supposed to sunset, a tax that's supposed to sunset. That would essentially be a lot more money coming out of the people's pockets. And then the internet sales tax, which I understand had the corporate tax reform. That's the only way I think it was going to pass. But I guess my question is, I've seen the DFNA numbers, and a lot of other legislators have said this. But do you think the amount of money the people are giving to the government is going to increase?
And I want to answer that question. I am going to give you a straight answer on it. But I do want to make this point that as Arkansas becomes more lean in its budget, and I believe it has about every session, under Republican leadership, one way or the other. The question that we really need to start asking when we get finished with the session is, are we leaving the session with a tax policy that lines up better with conservative ideals than what we had before? And I think that if you look at the session, there were some tax increases in places, and like you said, we had a great tax cut. And so as we look at these revenues, we got to think, are we penalizing income earners? No, we're not. Are we getting it from usage? Yeah, we are. That's where we're developing some of our tax base from. And so we're looking at that. As far as this session goes, I think some of the revenues raised, for like 911, there's some fees there.
Yep.
Coming from a county position. Those are important. I mean, look at the situation we're in now in Arkansas. I mean, we have a need for strong 911 systems. The roads, was that a perfect highway bill? Not at all. Are there things that we're going to have to come back and do later? Definitely. But, as far as what I think Arkansans are going to walk away with, long term, I think they will see more money in their pockets. Short term, I think it's kind of a net neutral situation. But I think the question that we need to be asking ourselves, because in any situation, the state is going to need revenue to operate. And we've just got to say, are we being conservative in how we are generating those revenues? Are we penalizing income earners? Or are we using, and of course I'm being kind of frank with my philosophy there on how that should happen. But, I feel positive about it. It was a hard session for a conservative to come into when you had needs that had been kicked down the road for so long.
You talking about on the highways?
Highway and 911 primarily, yeah. I mean, those are needs that we have had for a long time. And again, were they perfect bills? Not at all. But if we wait for a perfect bill, then our roads will deteriorate. 911 won't get taken care of. And I mean, there are some real issues with 911. So, I stand by. I voted for both those, and I stand by those votes. But as far as where we are at, I think that it's neutral, but in the long term, Arkansans will see a positive, in their pocketbook.
So neutral. So you're saying like right now in the short term, no one would be paying any more money. That's what your contention is after all of this.
You know, I mean, I think that'd be a fair assessment. Could it be a little more for some? Could it be a little less for others? Yes, but I think over the next couple years, Arkansans will really see the benefit of that.
Well, I mean, let me say, there's no question that bringing the rate, this is my opinion, Spencer, no question bringing the rate down from 6.9 to 5.9, that's not going to materialize for a few years, but that's good, right? Okay, that's a better structure. But what I was focusing on, really ever since this time last year, I was asking, okay, what about the tax burden? What's the overall tax burden? Well, the only way I see that as X is, how much money are the people giving to the government? Generally speaking, this much money going to the government, versus if you're going to give a tax cut, the definition of that is a decrease in the amount of money that's going to the government. And, if I look here at the DFNA's own numbers, for example, fiscal year 2020, you're looking at $43 million more from the people to the government because of the internet sales tax. Then you got that cigarette paper tax, that's $720,000. A gas tax increase would be $57 million. You do have a $25 million cut in 2020 with those income tax cuts. But then you get to the homestead and the homestead property tax credit, which is another cut, $12.5 million. But then you get another increase. Cell phone fees, that was for the 911, $10 million more from the people to the government, then a water fee bill, another $1 million. I mean, that is a net tax increase in fiscal year 2020 of $75 million, going from the people to the government. And so, that's my metric is, I know. Go ahead.
And I understand where you're coming from, and I think that with conversations with other legislators, we're not done with tax reform. There is still so much to do with that. I think that the revenues actually that you're quoting from the internet sales tax, I think that those may come in higher, and that's money that I think that we need to come back next session and say, if it does come in higher, which I believe it will, how are we going to put that back in the people's pockets? But everybody, I was talking to Austin McCollum about this, and man, he's a great, solid conservative, and I know that you guys know that better than I do, but everybody likes to talk about tax cuts. And of course, but here's the thing, we've got to start talking about spending cuts.
Yes.
I mean, that's where it is, and as I went through the session, there's only so much you can do, and of course the way that Arkansas is set up, you come in and then it's like fire hydrant, and you just is open and you just get it all at once. But then after you sit down and you look through everything and you say, oh wow, look, there's some millions of dollars over here that aren't even being used. Mm-hmm. And and what are we doing with this? There's money lying around, and instead of legislators looking at it and saying that's going to be my honeypot, we need to say this is money that we need to cut back on.
Yeah,
I
agree.
And I think that's one thing that I'm looking forward to do here in the interim. They've got me, on legislative audit, and I'm being able to pay attention to some things. I'll be down there today, and again, I think that a lot of what we did this past session were necessary. Do I like, raising taxes? No. I mean, I've paid my fair share of taxes, but what we did this session were necessaries to do. And I do think, as far as, again, the policy with what we've set forth as far as the corporate businesses coming in, being more tax advantageous for them, I think that Arkansas is going to benefit from what we did this session, and you will see those increased revenues. But there's still so much work to do, Paul.
There certainly is, and Spencer Hawks, I appreciate you coming on. And I think this was your first time on. I'd love to do it again sometime, and I appreciate you spending some time with us this morning, especially at 6:30 in the morning. So I know that's
Hey, any time, Paul. It was a pleasure, and again, I do want to put out there, be praying for the folks here in Perry and Faulkner County and all across the state as we continue to deal with this flood. And Paul, thank you for what you do for the state of Arkansas and broadcasting conservative principles. I really do appreciate that.
Hey, thank you for that, Spencer. And absolutely, we will pray for everybody in the path of that water. So be safe, sir. Have a good weekend.
Okay, thanks, sir.
All righty. Folks, we're going to take a break. I understand we have Jonesboro City Councilman Bobby Long, who's also running for state representative. He is in studio. We're going to talk about a sales tax increase and what's up with that. When we come back, well, actually not when we come back, but that's coming up at 7:05. We're going to take a break, reset, be back in just a moment.
To see the return on investment that we wanted to see. I mean, a few weeks even before the vote, I remember reading an article that the highway department had given $1 million to the U of A for an engineering building. And, you know, as someone who's watching the people's checkbook, I'm thinking, why are you giving $1 million to another government organization that already gets millions of dollars from the state already?
Yeah.
You know? And so things like that just, you know, they don't make me feel good about giving a blank check to an organization and just say, you know, here, tax the people some more and do what you say you're going to do without a lot of, I think, restraints on what they can do. And then, too, I mean, just a very solid evaluation of what exactly do you need. I mean, and so that's kind of how I got to my no vote and why I felt like I just didn't feel that at the time it was a prudent decision to make. So.
Well, I think that's a really good explanation. And while we're on the tax situation, you know, you also voted for the $95 million tax cut, which was a standalone bill moving us from 6.9% to 5.9% over the next couple of years. That was a good bill. That was early in the session, really good sign of unity. But then you did have these other bills. You voted against them, but they did pass. And so it's more money coming out of people's pockets. So I'm curious, Aaron, as to your opinion on when it's all said and done, do you think that when it's all said and done, this is going to be a net tax increase on the people after the session as opposed to before the session?
Well, I would hopefully it's a net decrease, and I haven't seen the latest numbers from DFNA yet because, yeah, there's always the projection, and then there's the reality of what happened. And so that's kind of what I'm more interested to see is the reality of those numbers come in. I hope ultimately that larger tax that we gave them in the beginning of the session will show that ultimately there is a decrease in collections. Same with the reduction in the corporate taxes that was passed as well. But it's just one of those things where we'll have to see. And, you know, and of course, you know, you can't measure just on collections. You need to understand how the population changes. If we get more people coming into the state and so our collections go up, great.
Correct.
But I think by that same notion, though, if anything, that means that gives us an opportunity to cut taxes even more. You know, there was a bill by, I believe it was Representative Ladyman, to do a study about reducing sales tax. We want a high sales tax. And say, you know, task force to see more cuts we can do. But, you know, in my opinion, is I think we should have done that instead to look at reducing income tax. And we're sandwiched in between Tennessee and Texas, which don't have state.
Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine. And it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
People who have said, I'm thinking about moving to this state because I don't have to pay income tax. Or they say, I've got a job that lets me work remote. I love living in Arkansas because my family's here, but I can go move to Dallas or I can go move to Nashville, not pay state income tax, and live in, a larger city. And so, it's something that we realize if we want to compete in our own region, not even, we're not even talking about trying to compete with New York, California here to try to get talent. We're trying to compete with talent next door. We've got to be way more aggressive in how competitive we are. And so, sorry, I went off on a tangent.
No. I agree with you, and I hope we would take every opportunity to reduce taxes more. We talked to a lot of your colleagues, and many of your colleagues have said on the program in their impression, they've said, that taxes it does look like it will be a net tax increase, based on those DFNA numbers. But what I've also been asking them, Aaron, is were you upset at all that there didn't seem to be much of a discussion on spending cuts, finding the savings elsewhere? And I've used this as an analogy, an example. What if they said, hey, okay, we want to raise your gas tax because we need some money from you. But we need $95 million, but we found 50 in savings. So we're not going to ask you, you know what I'm saying? But there just didn't seem to even be that discussion that was had this session.
Yeah. And I would agree. I mean, there are things, we did the homestead tax credit. We increased that as well. And so, there's a part of me that just was saying, okay, I understand we're doing that, which is great, but for it, happy it happened. But it's like we're cutting here, but we're increasing over here, and these things don't seem like they're making sense, because why are we cutting just so we can say we made a cut when we're in fact increasing over here, and it's not, and it's affecting the same people. And I would agree with the cutting.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Mexico. The tariffs. Have you heard about this? I mean, I love avocados, and I love guacamole. And am I willing to pay more for avocados so the United States can try to solve this illegal immigration problem? Of course I am. But maybe some of you, not so much. Anyway, Mexico and the U.S. government are in negotiations because the tariffs are not on yet. This from Zero Hedge. After both the United States and Mexico claim to have had a very good discussion to avert President Trump's tariff threat, and the U.S. weighing a delay over concerns that both sides wouldn't be able to reach an agreement on all the measures Mexico would need to take to avert them, Mexico showed yet another act of good faith yesterday by freezing the bank accounts of 26 alleged human traffickers. The ministry's Financial Intelligence Unit said in a statement it froze the accounts due to probable links with human trafficking and illegal aid to migrant caravans. The FIU added that it would present the case to the Attorney General's office. Negotiators from both countries are discussing a new framework that would dramatically increase Mexico's immigration enforcement efforts. Mexican officials have pledged to deploy, get this, 6,000 National Guard troops to the country's southern border with Guatemala. We wonder, will congressional Democrats pounce on Mexico for this decision like they did when President Trump instituted the same policy by sending the National Guard to our southern border? Anyway, let's hope we don't have to pay more in avocados. but or a higher price to buy avocados. But if we do, it will be a small sacrifice to stop this invasion in violation of our sovereignty. And there'll be some of you out there, I can hear you now, that will say that we should boycott avocados. But I don't know if I can go that far, folks.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Trying to find ways to cut because everyone comes and says everything they do is essential and everyone's essential. And I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people who aren't, but unfortunately there's a lot of people who aren't. And, you know, we did things, I think, to kind of make sure that we can make those cuts in the future. But I think, you know, when rubber meets the road, we need to start doing them sooner rather than later. You know, with the refiguration of the state government, I'm hoping that we'll be able to find a lot of things next session after the dust has settled down over that of areas where we can consolidate and cut. Because in reality, I mean, I think there's a true point. Which is you talk to one agency and they're doing something almost exactly similar to another agency, and you're going, why are y'all doing almost the exact same job? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's a good way to do it. And two, I mean, I can't remember what representative said it to me, but he was talking to me about when we were talking about cutting spending. He says, you know, a lot of things come down to personnel, because that's going to be 60 to 80% of your cost in every department. So when you talk about cutting spending, you're talking about cutting personnel. And I think for us, you know, we need to say, you know, where is an opportunity for us to move people to be no private sector employees and no longer government employees. And, you know, and honestly, for employees, it's better for them. I mean, they get better benefits working somewhere else, better wages working somewhere else. You know, and I think that's something we should really look at. And there was legislation I did that kind of flew under the radar, but we reformed something called CGAP, which was basically a grievance process that had been established, I think, during the Beebe administration. And unfortunately, it was a huge waste of money for the state to do it, because you had these meetings where, you know, someone could put a grievance against a superior or against a coworker. They'd have these long, drawn-out meetings with attorneys, and the state's paying for, you know, 3 attorneys to be in the room with all these other people doing these, you know, hours upon hours long meetings. And, you know, these people came to me and asked me to run this bill, and I said, Aaron, we've got people who are upset because someone yelled at someone else, not even them, but they want to have an 8-hour meeting about their grievance. And I was like, shouldn't HR be doing that? And they go, yeah, they should be, but they're using this process. So, I mean, things like that. Process improvement is always a great way for us to find ways to save money. Yeah. But it's just, I think sometimes it's changing the organization and then looking at, okay, 2 people are doing the exact same job. Can it be done by 1 person? And, you know, can we find ways to offload people onto the private sector?
Yeah. What were your, real quick, we're running out of time, what were your thoughts on the social issues and the progress that was made there?
So I think we did a lot of good things. I think the trigger bill by Representative Bentley and Representative Jason Rayford, the pro-life one, was fantastic that we did. I think as far as gun legislation went, I was a little disappointed. We weren't able to get the Stand Your Ground bill passed. You know, as you know, I was a House sponsor on both those pieces of legislation. I mean, we worked tirelessly to try to get that to where we could get people on board and get it to go. And unfortunately, I think the committees ended up being kind of more stumbling blocks for us than the actual floors, because, I mean, we counted on the floor. We knew we had the votes. It's just trying to get those out of those committees. And just, we were, you know, really kind of hamstrung by that.
Yeah.
And so those, I mean, as far as those kind of social issues go, I mean, that's kind of my impression. I think we did a lot of good pro-life legislation, and I'm very proud of that. And I saw that the latest report came out, and the number of abortions in Arkansas has been decreasing. I think about a 40-year low, which is fantastic. You know, and so I also did a bill in regards to female breast milk, which was kind of an odd one to do, but with the high infant mortality rate, and that was aimed at kind of trying to reduce the infant mortality rate here in Arkansas. And so, you know, this helps us set up rules so that a nonprofit can come in here and help the state out. So,
I was in the room.
Our local hospitals.
I remember that. Yeah. And to be clear, it didn't regulate like mother to mother like voluntary exchanges.
Yeah.
If with breast milk. So.
Correct. No, it didn't add any new regulation onto any existing things. So if you're wanting to give to someone else, or I know some people do it on Facebook, they offer it to other people in their community. All that stuff's still fine. This just helps kind of establish for us when to set one up in the state, because our nonprofit wanted to come and set one up in the state because, firstly, we don't, and what a lot of people don't know is we have to import it from Texas. So we have hospitals around here, that are, a lot of them are small and rely on state funding, and they're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey, folks, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. For those of you who are astute observers, the microphone in my studio is now to my right, okay? Which, if that means that I have somebody in studio to my right? It's normally on my left when I don't have, but now I have somebody in studio. Just, I'm letting you know, this is what you can anticipate. So we have Jonesboro City Councilman Bobby Long is back with us. Bobby, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good.
Okay.
I'm doing good.
Always great to have you on.
I love coming in early and talking before.
Yeah.
It just makes my day better.
Yeah, it's fun in here. It's a fun environment, and it's Johnny Cash Friday. All right, so first of all, you are running for state representative.
Yes.
There's going to be a primary. You have so that'll be, I guess, Cole Peck is running again for that seat. So that'll be, interesting in and of itself. Mm-hmm. But you have a launch event. Tell us about that first.
I do. We have a campaign kickoff fundraiser June the 29th at the Hilton Garden Inn here in Jonesboro. It'll be from 2 to 4, and I just ask that all you guys come out and let me meet you. Mm-hmm. If I hadn't met you already, I'd love to meet you, and we'll discuss our plans for going into the primary, and then from the primary on into November.
Nice. Well, that'll be a fun event, and I'll certainly make plans to be there. So
we would love to have you there, Paul.
That's always good. So let's talk a little bit about you're right now a public official. You're an alderman for the city of Jonesboro, and for those of you across the state listening, we covered Fort Smith's Marshall Museum. You remember this? This was a potential tax increase that was voted down. The people of Fort Smith said, no, we don't want to pay more taxes for this museum. This is a similar tax increase proposal on the other side of the state in Jonesboro. Is it being called like quality of life, or they're saying that the quality of life will be better because, if we raise taxes by 1%, right?
Yeah, let me just sort of go over the whole ordinance. There's one ordinance that calls for a 1% sales tax, and within that single ordinance, the 1% is split half for fire and police, and one half for amenities, and there is a list. I mean, you're looking at projects for the arts, aquatics, beautification, libraries, museums, park facilities, recreational facilities, sidewalks, trail systems, and the list is just as wide open as the imagination can be. There's going to be the proposal would put forth a committee of 9 people, 2 from the council, 6 at large appointed by the mayor and the AP chair. They would form what they call an integrity committee charged with the job of vetting these projects and making recommendations to the council for approval. But I just have some questions, a lot of questions, and I'm trying to get those answered before we hang $220 million on the taxpayer over 12 years.
It's unbelievable. Now you actually proposed a resolution to separate these two, to have two separate votes. Because if one's for police and fire, we're like, okay, give the people the opportunity to vote for that, but be able to vote against swimming pool.
Yeah, my proposal, first of all, was put the brakes on the whole thing and get some answers, because we have absolutely no idea where they derived the 1% from. We have absolutely no idea where they derived whether or not, or the data that would indicate that 0.5% for fire is enough, 0.5% for the other things are enough. You know, Calvin Coolidge said collecting more taxes than is absolutely necessary is legalized robbery. And until we get a good handle on how they actually derived these figures, then we have absolutely no idea whether or not it's enough, too much, you know, or just right. So I think until we get some of those questions answered, I think it would be foolish for us to put this in front of the people. And as part of the city council, I think that's a job of the city council, is to review these things and ask questions, scrutinize these, you know, and make sure. Yeah.
But you're kind of a lone voice, right?
I am the lone voice.
Yeah, you're the lone voice that's skeptical about this. Because I know there's an organization out there calling themselves Team Jonesboro, which essentially means that if you're against higher taxes, that you're not on the team. Which I find a little bit of offensive. That you can't have a legitimate view that this is a terrible idea, because the idea of more money coming out of people's pockets to fund, you know, really what is an ever expanding government can be seen as a negative idea. But what about your colleagues? Is there any talk out there that having this in a special election is shady because they know the statistics?
Well, I believe they're counting on the statistics.
Yeah.
You know, when I started looking at this, where did they actually come up with this 1%? Where'd they come up with 12 years? Why not 15? Why not 10? Why 1%?
Why not 5?
3/4? Why not a quarter and a half?
Yeah.
And I found it interesting that one of the cities that's, you know, been brought up time and time again is Fayetteville. And I just recently learned that Fayetteville had a 1% tax for 12 years. It was set to sunset January of this year. Guess what happened?
They had a special
election. They
election.
had a special election and renewed the tax.
Yeah, I covered that. Yeah.
Yeah, so...
But look at who Fayetteville's state representatives are. It's a very they're Democrats, and they're for higher tax. But look who Cricket County and Jonesboro's represent. They're Republicans, and they've got good voting records. And so I think it's weird when you have let's say city councilmen, not like you, but others that are pushing for higher revenue from the people, and then you have others who tend to not do those things. You know,
at the finance committee. The Tuesday before this past Tuesday, I stood up and I gave my reasons as to why, I believe we need to put this brakes on. And if they are dead set against, or dead determined on putting this thing through, I asked for a motion to actually send this to the city attorney, have them split this into two, to where you have, half for fire and police, half for minis. That way the people, you could actually get a true representation of what the people wanted.
Yeah.
They could vote for one or the other, both or neither. That motion was ignored. I asked for it twice, and I'll ask for it again, just to make sure, but...
Well, let's assume that the police and fire really need it.
Yeah.
There's a good chance this is going to go down in flames, even though they're going to do it in a special election. I'm just telling you right now. I mean, property maintenance code. Remember the International Property Code that was passed, and then it was, when people get involved, people forget that this Cricket County, for example, voted for Ted Cruz in a Republican primary. Now, I know it's not a primary situation. You're going to have Democrats coming to the polls as well, but I think people need to understand. Maybe they're forgetting how conservative, the voters really are, and they're tired of higher taxes. Now, but if you really needed police and fire, and I fought this battle. This is my 10th year in radio. 10 years ago, there was a 0.5-cent sales tax that was on the ballot, and I was only on KBTM here in Jonesboro, only on one station, and I fought, and I grabbed the tail of an animal, and it realized it was an elephant. And it passed, I mean, it was for police and fire. That's what they said it was, and it ended up just being a shell game, right?
Yeah.
They already had the money to fund police and fire, and then they gave that from the budget, or they took the money that was going to police and fire and then moved it away and then used the half cent to fund police and fire, and then they were able to spend it on it. And that's exactly what's going on here again 10 years later. I want people to realize this. I may not be wiser or smarter, but I certainly remember what happened 10 years ago in Northeast Arkansas. So anyway, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're right. I think that people, though, deserve. The thing about it is, my reasoning for splitting that up was that I believe people need to know. I believe more information.
Yeah.
The more information you can get, the wiser decision you can make. And since I do feel that I'm the only one that's asking questions from the council, I really feel that come 4 weeks from now, this is the first reading last Tuesday. It goes through 2 more readings. On the 3rd reading, there'll be a vote whether or not to put this on the ballot or not. And I really feel like that this will end up on the ballot. However, I do know that the last tax increase was defeated, 60-40. And I think that you throw this out and I trust the people of Jonesboro.
Yeah.
I do, and I think they're going to do the right thing.
September 10th would be the special
September
election.
10th would be the
It's right after school starts back, right after Labor Day. Come on out and see. This is what's so frustrating to me. I think this is morally wrong. It'd be one thing if a tornado had come through,
right,
and it was an actual emergency special election, but they're wanting it on a special election so they have a statistically higher chance of getting what they want. And in doing that, Bobby, what's frustrating to me is whether you're for higher taxes or against higher taxes, there's a larger principle, a higher principle at play here, and that principle is this. If you're a public official, you should want the largest section of the population to vote so that you truly have the consent of the governed.
Exactly.
So that you truly have. And when you've got people putting their kids back in school, when you've got people going to work, most people only vote twice. They vote during a big, either, during the primary or during the midterms. They'll vote during the midterms in a primary and a general, or they'll vote during the general election every 4 years in a primary or in November. And basically those 4 times, and these special elections are designed for tax increases to have a higher chance of passing when you have a population that's going to work, trying to put trying to put ends meet on the table. And that's why it's morally wrong for them to do it in a special election unless it was an emergency, and it's not. A swimming pool, an aquatic center, bike trails, they're not an emergency.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I think, well, first of all, in Fayetteville, early voting, I think, was around 10% of the electorate. And overall, I think it may be around 20, maybe a little under 20. And I feel that that's what's going to happen. I think there's a couple of things, though, that I'd like to try to clarify. One is that Jonesboro does not operate in a bubble. We not only have this tax, looking at, but do you think that if we pass this tax, that impact fees aren't going to still be talked about? Food prep tax is not going to be talked about. Stormwater drainage fees are still going to be coming on. Not to mention, some of the tax increases that are looming from us that are going to impact us from Little Rock.
Yeah.
With the gas tax and things like that. So we do not operate in a bubble. I think the second clarification that I'd like people to know is that time after time, when Team Jonesboro, let me say this, there's a lot of people on Team Jonesboro that are my friends, my neighbors.
And pillars of the community.
They are.
Pillars of the community. Good people.
Yes.
Good people.
Yes. I've known Jerry Morgan for years, and he and I had a good conversation. Demos, he saw me come over and visited with me, and that's great, but we're going to agree to disagree on this one. But Team Jonesboro consistently puts forth the mantra that, they can't see a scenario where the city council would not approve a recommendation for a project because that committee represents the will of the people. That committee does not represent the will of the people. That committee represents 9 people. 2 of those would be elected, but even the city council members were not elected for the sole purpose of vetting that. Mm-hmm. So these people are appointed appointed people do not represent the electorate.
Correct.
They represent the will of those 9. So I think that is a big point.
Well, yeah, that is a great point. Another point would be, and I don't mean to sound elitist, but I just wonder, some of the people advocating this, have they ever researched or looked into, economics? How you incentivize, are people going to be more incentivized, for example, to interact in commerce if the taxes are too high? Is there a limit, right? You say 1%. Well, why not? If 1% is harmless, why not 5%? Why not 5%?
Well, they make the comparison that Jonesboro has the lowest sales tax rate, but against 5.
Put that on a billboard.
Put that against 5 other cities, though. When you look at Arkansas as a whole, the average sales tax rate is around 8.624. Mm-hmm. We're right smack in the middle. Mm-hmm. But if you look at Arkansas as a whole, look what happens in Northwest Arkansas, where they have to have fuel exemption.
Yeah.
Why do they do that? It's because overall our sales tax rate is so high that people can go right across the border and get it for cheaper.
Yep.
And there are tax exemptions in every single side of our state. So yes, we do as a whole. Yeah, Jonesboro may have 8.5, but still, when I can pull 5 cities, and ours would be the highest. Because
right. Well, here's the thing. Arkansas generally, though, on average, is one of the highest sales tax states in the country. And we're 44th in per capita income, and there's a reason for that. I mean, we and so it makes absolutely no sense. And I guess my point is if we're just going to go down a wish list, and this is what we would love to have. We'd love to have a swimming pool. This community has a swimming pool. We'd love to have a shooting range. We'd love to have bike trails. Those are all great ideas in terms of, they'd be nice to have. I mean, I'm not going to say that they'd be great to have, but we don't operate in a world of unlimited resources. I think we have some people that assume that we do.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that this tax, 1% split out inside the ordinance, half for fire and police, half for amenities. But then the argument that they make is that you cannot separate public safety from quality of life. Now, sometimes I would agree on a certain level. Yes, you do have to have public safety in order to have a quality of life. But I don't see where a water park increases my public safety.
Correct.
So I think there's a cutoff point there.
Correct.
But they are adamant saying that you cannot separate public safety from quality of life, but yet they separate the 1% inside the ordinance.
Yes, they do.
Why do they do that?
Why do they do that?
My proposition was to separate it outside the ordinance. And then my question is, if it's a bad idea to separate it outside the ordinance, why is it a good idea to separate it inside the ordinance? Why not just make it 1%? That way more money can come in faster for dire need projects, and then all these other things get prioritized.
Yeah.
But see, that's the thing. It's like an inconsistency in thought. It's a good idea outside, but it's not a good idea inside.
Yeah, and I think if you separate it out, they know that the water park and bike trails will fail, and the police and fire might tend to pass.
Right. Not to mention the fact that you have a tax, that could ultimately put a governmental entity in competition with private industry.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right.
And I don't agree with that.
Well, there are shooting ranges, that are privately owned. Do you want to build a shooting range and put the privately owned ones out of business?
Well, I mean, and that the shooting range that goes out is going to have probably a gift shop where you can buy earplugs, glasses, things like that.
Yep.
All right, so that puts pressure on local businesses that are trying to operate for a profit and pay taxes in our schools.
Yeah.
Now, my question is, we have this $54 million bike trail, that's on the horizon. Are we going to have gift shops at every head of those bike trails? And are we going to sell bike parts, helmets, things like that at these little gift shops and squeeze the local business person?
It wouldn't be the first time if the government were to raise taxes and then use that tax money to put other privately owned businesses out of business or make it harder. It wouldn't be the first time.
Right. See, that was one of my questions, are we going to first solicit and go after private industry for some of these projects. For instance, water parks, there's companies out there that do that for a business. They come in, evaluate a community. If that community fits their model, they come in, they buy our land, employ our people, build it, run it for a profit, and pay property taxes to support our schools. I mean,
you make too much sense, though. And I'll say all this. I want to end here. The idea of a sales tax is that the more people that move here in Arkansas, or Jonesboro's seen a giant surge in population over the last days. The more people that move here, the more people that are by, the more money. Your revenue goes up. Why can't they just take the increase in revenue that they're getting and put it back a few years and then build whatever they want to build? Yeah. Why do they have to come to us? Your property tax your property tax and your sales tax are designed. The more people that live here, the more money you get to take care of, quote, to take care of the people.
Right. See, right now, Jonesboro is the fifth in population, fifth largest city in the state of Arkansas in population. We are the second largest in land mass. So we have a huge amount of land.
Yeah.
That we annexed. I forgot when that was.
Yeah.
But we annexed a lot and we spread ourselves thin. So I believe that as Jonesboro fills in, that's going to happen.
I wonder if people were building outside the annex part because of the tax policy, and then you're like, oh, okay, well now we've got all this tax revenue. All right, Bobby Long, appreciate it, sir. Look forward to your formal announcement for state representative at a later date, June 29th at the Hilton Garden. We appreciate you coming on, sir.
I'm so glad you're going to be there, Paul.
Yeah. All right, so he's holding me to it. He's holding me to my word. What is he? Okay, so folks, we got to take a break. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we'll be getting an impression of the session from talk radio host of the Dave Ellswick Show, Mr. Dave Ellswick. Don't go anywhere. We've been doing these segments called Impression of the Session. We're doing a lot of them. Here now, welcome, State Representative Aaron Pilkington is on the line from District 69. Aaron, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Before we get into your impression of the session, I'm just going to give you the floor and let you take it wherever you want to go. But can you tell us about how your community's doing? Are you guys staying dry? How's the flooding in your area?
So we've been pretty lucky here in Johnson County. We've had a few areas flood down the Heartland Bottoms. We've had some issues, but I mean, compared to some of the other counties around us, we're doing fairly well, and I have to give a lot of credit to Jess Johnson, our emergency director. He has been doing a fantastic job, and I know he's been working hard, making sure our county's taken care of, and then even helping assist other counties like Polk County. And so I just luckily, like I said, we've been very fortunate, and at the same time we've had a great crew here that's been helping out with our area and surrounding areas.
Good. That's good to hear. Well, let's just let me give you the floor. You take it where you want to go. State Representative Aaron Pilkington, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Well, my impression of the session for 2019 was, I kind of jokingly refer to it as the eating the vegetables session. There's a lot of good legislation that happened. No, I think caught national headlines. I think that were good to kind of make the state better. But at the same time, I mean, there was a lot of things I think that I wish hadn't happened. I just wish we would have done a few things differently. And but being one of 100, you can just say your piece and move on with that. I will say, and healthcare is my specialty, and in the realm of healthcare, I think we've done a lot of good things to try to move the state forward. I saw a lot of good legislation to try to use technology to help cut healthcare costs here in Arkansas, and us being an innovative state in that way. I had a bill that allowed us to create a pilot program to use ride sharing like Uber and Lyft to take people to the doctor instead of having to pay these large contracts to companies that do transportation that cost a lot of money. Things like that, I think that help us save money, but at the same time, make sure that people get the care they need is an important step for the state.
Did you get pushback on that piece of legislation?
In the beginning, we did. We got some pushback, but eventually we were able to kind of overcome it because the way that we worked with a few of the other current companies, we just said, this isn't. We just wanted to make sure let's just add the tool to the toolbox, kind of as we said. So, I mean, hopefully, agents hopefully, our Medicaid program will realize this is a cheaper option, and then exclusively go with that in areas where they can go with it. But just not completely eliminating those right now was a way to kind of ease into that reform. But I mean, of course, there's always pushback. Anytime anyone has a contract with a government agency, I mean, they're not going to let that slip away from them that easily.
Yeah. This was also a big session for you. I mean, it's personal, but you got married this session, didn't you?
I did, yes.
Congratulations.
I was the crazy guy thank you. I was the crazy guy who got married during the middle of session. So that was pretty interesting, but it was great. Representative Justin Boyd and Representative Austin McCollum, they actually spoke at my wedding and read from the Bible at it. So that was really an awesome time to have some of my good colleagues there to celebrate that day with me. And it was great. But my wife she's amazing and a good conservative. She worked for Fox Business before moving down here to Arkansas, and so went to Hillsdale. And
nice.
So she's a true believer.
Well, so and I want to remind everybody that because I asked you about this, I was like, I saw you the next week. I was like, hey, what are you doing here? And you were like, well, we're not. We postponed the honeymoon until the session's over. So I will want everybody to know you didn't get married and then gallivant off somewhere. You put your honeymoon on hold, and so that's the price of public service, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. I thought a lot of people knew that I got married on a Saturday, so I flew up there Thursday night, and then got married, and then we were back in my seat the next week. And then, like I said, we decided to postpone our honeymoon, and luckily my wife was fine with that. She understood. I mean, she understands, that this is public service, and that this is just kind of a sacrifice you have to make. And but I got elected to do a job for the people, and I think me missing a week or two to go gallivant around somewhere else wouldn't be a good way to show my voters, how much respect they gave me the opportunity to be down there.
Well, we're talking with State Representative Aaron Pilkington, and I want to talk about some of your no votes on tax increases. SB 336, you voted no to provide additional revenue for the maintenance and repair of highways. This was a $95 million revenue increase that starts collection in October, going to cost people 3 cents more at the pump, 6 cents for diesel. And then a no vote to continue the levy of the 0.5% sales tax, which is going to be a massive tax increase if the voters vote for it. So what was your reasoning, Aaron, for voting against these bills to raise revenue from the people? And how did you stand up to some of their arguments? Because I know there was a big push to get Republicans to support it.
Yeah. These were, they really pushed hard, and these were some votes that were really difficult to make. I know, trucking being one of the large industries here in the state, I know that they really supported this. And, when you've got someone that uses the roads like this and realize that they're going to have to pay more too, saying that they want this, that's a compelling argument. But, ultimately think about what was best for my constituents. And, we're a low-income area. When I thought that this was going to be a lot of increases on how much that they're having to pay, and especially, too, when you're low income, a 3% increase in how much taxes really adds up, especially when you have such low disposable income. So those were kind of the reasons why I felt like it wasn't prudent for me to do it. And additionally, we had, I think Julie Mayberry was the one who had another plan to help with the raising funds in a different way that would have been more financially prudent. Yeah. And, we weren't able to hear that plan on the House floor, which was a shame. And so I think just, giving the House the ability to figure out which plan we, wanted and kind of letting them lay it out there what they think is going to work the best would have been the better way to do it. And so I think that would have just been probably a more fiscally conservative way to do it. And I'd say, too, it's always hard when you're voting against something like roads, which everyone uses, and everyone, generally is pretty popular with, using tax money to spend on that. But the reality is I just felt that we had spent a lot of money given to the highway department and then have not been able to see the return on investment that we wanted to see. I mean, a few weeks even before the vote, I remember reading an article that the highway department had given $1 million to the U of A for an engineering building. And
all right, folks, welcome back on this Johnny Cash Friday. Thank you so much for being with us. We can't do this program without you listening, and we really appreciate it. So we've been doing these things called Impressions of the Session. We already had one earlier today, around an hour ago. We were talking with State Representative Spencer Hawks. That video will be available over at conduitnews.com. But we have a very, let's just say, special impression of the session. We have on the phone line the host of the Dave Ellswick Show, Mr. Dave Ellswick. Dave, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, and Mr. was my father. You just call me Dave, you know that.
All right, yeah. So Dave, I just wanted to, I'm going to give you the floor, and then we can get into specifics later. Dave Ellswick, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Chances available, chances missed, chances made. I was happy in a few areas, disappointed in several areas, was not happy with the way they dealt with financial matters, happy with what they did as far as freedom of speech and life, disappointed about what they did with guns. I just don't know some of the things that they did and why they didn't do it. Of course, it was only one person that derailed the whole thing about, the castle doctor, stand your ground. That happened with Cooper. And we'll hopefully get rid of him come next spring. But we're finding out as we go along who the true conservatives are and who the pseudo-conservatives are.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about that. And it's definitely, we're definitely getting a lot more information, and that's good. Just in terms of, we have people voting for higher taxes. So when you said, financial things, is that what you're talking about? Are you kind of sad where everything ended up on the taxes?
Well, taxes, not cutting back on government, but expanding government. I mean, those are conservative Republican clauses that the legislature didn't deal with and didn't deal with them well. And the people that I talked to, there's a lot of people that weren't happy the way things went. Hopefully, in the next session that comes up, let's see, 19, 20, 21, I would hope that what we'll see is people who are able more to think for themselves and less for, I will do exactly as I've been told to march to do.
Yeah. You mentioned life, social issues. I mean, I thought one of the best moments of the session was the trigger bill, the anti-abortion trigger law.
Mm-hmm.
That was Senator Rapert and State Representative Bentley.
Well, I'll be honest. I mean, there's a lot of things that State Senator Rapert and I don't see eye to eye on. That is not one of them. I mean, he and I see eye to eye about life issues right on. I mean, he is one of the best pro-life politicians that I know. Mary Bentley's the same way, pro-life as well. She and I see eye to eye more with that. We see more eye to eye than probably on issues of taxation than what I do with Senator Rapert.
Do you think it would have been better? I mean, back to the tax increases. I think it would have been better if they would have said, okay, listen, we've got to have X amount of dollars more from the people. I mean, I still would have hated this, but X amount of dollars more from the people. We got to have it, but we've found $50-60 million in cuts or savings that we're going to use for roads or whatever. So we found that, and we only need, $30 million from the taxpayer. I mean, that would have at least been a little bit easier to swallow, but we didn't even have that conversation, it seems.
Oh, no, we didn't. We had that conversation back in 2013 when Beebe was the governor, and the bill moved along, and then it just suddenly disappeared and got squashed. When State Representative Mayberry brought it back up, I thought this is good, but it came up so late into the session that it didn't have a real chance to, I think, gain any kind of traction. That's the one that I've been watching all along and been hoping that they'll follow all along, but I don't think we're going to see it, Paul, and I think maybe you would agree with me on this. We won't see it until the present occupant that's in the governor's office has run his course as governor of the state.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. We're talking with Dave Ellswick. I can't call him Mr. We're talking with Dave Ellswick. He is the host of Dave Ellswick Show. You can hear him on 101.1 The Answer out of Little Rock every weekday from 2 to 6, right, Dave? It's on your 4-hour program.
Yep, I'm a 4-hour program. We're on 2 to 6, and we do it every day. We have fun. Some days we don't even talk politics. For the most part, though, we talk politics, and we do a lot on local politics. And that kind of takes me out of what a lot of people like. Sometimes they'd rather talk about what's happening on the national circuit instead of what's happening right here in our own borders. And what happens right here in your own state has more effect on you than what happens in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the Stand Your Ground law that failed, and it did fail by one vote out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, where Republican Senator John Cooper, who's now being primaried by Dan Sullivan, voted against it, voted with Stephanie Flowers. Speaking of, just kind of encapsulate, what was your impression on that whole situation, all the way from Stephanie Flowers' meltdown, where she told Alan Clark to go to hell, and to John Cooper's no vote, siding with the Democrats?
When I look at that, I still stand stunned. I was stunned that didn't pass. I think Stand Your Ground is a law in 33 states, so it's not like it's a hugely complicated or a hugely one of those bills that people find hard to understand or anything. I look at it, and it seems to me we all have the God-given right to protect our property, our curtilage, and everything else. And when we're out in public, we have the right to, protect our own bodies and maybe even protect the bodies of fellow citizens. I didn't understand what the problem was. I didn't hear it directly from Cooper. I heard it from reliable people that I know who he told them that he voted against because his prosecutor told him to vote against it. I heard that the sheriffs, I heard that the Arkansas State Police, I heard that the prosecuting attorneys all were telling many people that we didn't need this bill because we already had this bill within our present laws. I say you can't have too many bills that protect the Second Amendment and protect people and give people the rights to protect themselves.
I completely agree. I completely agree with you, Dave. Towards the end of the session, there were throughout the session there were some divisions among Republicans, but that's not true when it came to the end of the session with the anti-sanctuary city bill. Now, you live in central Arkansas, and there were all of these rumors floating around that Little Rock was edging toward being a sanctuary city. So I think this was a highlight of some of the good that was done, don't you?
Well, look, I've been talking about what Little Rock has been doing under the four mayors of Stodola for the last 2.5 years, and the issuance of ID cards and all kinds of things going on. And, you can look at a dog and call it an orange, but if it looks, it smells, it barks, it acts like a dog, it's a dog. And the bottom line was that's exactly what they were doing in the city, edging towards sanctuary status, and they're not saying it because they don't want to. It's not a matter of tipping people off. If people look at it, they see it. The bottom line is they're just they don't want to say it because it's such an incendiary word. But they're moving towards being a sanctuary city. You got them, you got Eureka Springs, you got Fayetteville. All of those areas in this state are edging more and more towards sanctuary city status for illegal aliens, and we don't need that here in this state. Look, we know all the arguments. We know, the illegal immigrants, if we give them, ID, They think that the police are nice to them and the government's nice to them, and they're more apt to help us in investigations. If they're afraid that you're going to identify them and send them back home, they won't. Well, you know what? If they want to be American citizens, then they're going to identify wrongdoers. If they don't deserve to be American citizens.
We're talking to the sage of Arkansas Talk Radio, Dave Ellswick. He's host of the Dave Ellswick Show. You can hear him on Little Rock's 101.1 The Answer. Many of you do. We're broadcasting right now on 101.1 The Answer. Dave, you have been doing talk radio for a very long time, and you've been in Arkansas for a while as well, and you have a very unique perspective. You have seen Arkansas be an anomaly in terms of being a Democrat state dominated by Democrats, a blue state really in a sea of southern red compared to our neighbors. And then you saw what happened with Obama. You saw this transition. So from where we are today versus where we were, I would love to get your comments on seeing this transition and, where we need to go from here.
Well, I'll tell you. I think we are where we were when I was in Indiana at WIBC in Indianapolis. I went there to be a political reporter. I covered the State House, and then they moved me over into talk. And they went red in the mid-'90s. They went solidly red in the mid-'90s. But they had, at that point, they had themselves a Democrat governor. A lot of us remember when he was in Indiana. It took them about 2 full sessions to really get their sea legs as far as Republicanism went. We've had now 2 full sessions with a large majority of Republicans here in this state. I believe starting in the next general session, we will start seeing that movement that we all have been hoping for from the conservative side of starting to see them cut back on government. Like I told you, I believe that it will take for the current occupant, who is of course Governor Hutchinson. He's kind of the transition guy, and he's there to. Whether he's wanting to do it or not, what he's doing is moving us towards when the conservatives will really take over. And I believe after the next election for governor, we'll have a governor who really wants to move towards real solid conservative principles, what you and I would call solid conservative principles. When we will actually see people not say we've got to, we got to have, if we take $46 million from over here to put it into a tax cut over here. We don't go looking for another $46 million we can raise in taxes so that we pay for the $46 million that we just gave to people. In other words, taking money out of their right pocket and putting it in their left pocket, and then they're taking that money out of their left pocket and putting it in their back pocket.
Yeah. No, that's a really I like your optimism there, and also honesty about where we are and how there is a lot more to do, and hopefully we will have, and I can sense people are getting bolder, but it just it's also a leadership issue, like you said, from the governor to the people in leadership. We've got to have people who are willing to. It seems like there's some who are wanting to promote the unity of the party, and it's really kind of a facade because the party in many ways is not unified. I mean, we are on some issues like the life, like the social issues, anti-illegal immigration. But gosh, when it comes to economic issues, it just seems like it's really hard to change that mentality. Like you said, if we got to have revenue neutral, and in Arkansas's case, we got tax increases coming,
Well, here's the key. We have a lot of people in the Republican Party who don't know what it means to be a Republican, to be honest with you. All you got to do is talk to them for 20 minutes, and you can figure that out, Paul. You talk to enough people in the capsules and know that they're there to be told basically what to do. They don't have a Hills being an understanding the principles of republicanism.
That's very well said. I think that's where we'll leave it. Dave Ellswick, it's always great to talk to you, my friend. I appreciate who you are, what you do, what you stand for, and thanks for giving us your impression of the session, sir.
Sure thing, Paul, anytime, but let's try to do it later in the day.
All right, let's do it. We'll tape it. We'll tape it, so, or I'll come on your show. Okay, all right. Thanks,
That's
Dave.
good. We'll talk to you later.
Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it. Folks, we're gonna go to break here. We got some Johnny Cash music. One of my favorites, Ragged Old Flag, coming your way right now. Back in just a moment.
You know, as someone who's watching the People's Checkbook, I'm thinking, why are you giving $1 million to another government organization that already gets millions of dollars from the state already?
Yeah.
You know, and so things like that just, you know, they don't make me feel good about giving a blank check to an organization and just say, you know, here, tax the people some more and do what you say you're going to do without a lot of, I think, restraints on what they can do. And then, too, I mean, just a very solid evaluation of what exactly do you need. I mean, and so that's kind of how I got to my no vote and why I felt like I just didn't feel that at the time it was a prudent decision to make. So.
Well, I think that's a really good explanation. And while we're on the tax situation, you know, you also voted for the $95 million tax cut, which was a standalone bill, moving us from 6.9% to 5.9% over the next couple of years. That was a good bill. That was early in the session, really good sign of unity. But then you did have these other bills. You voted against them, but they did pass, and so it's more money coming out of people's pockets. So I'm curious, Aaron, as to your opinion on when it's all said and done. Do you think that when it's all said and done, this is going to be a net tax increase on the people after the session as opposed to before the session?
Well, I would hopefully it's been a net decrease, and I haven't seen the latest numbers from DFNA yet, because there's always the projection, and then there's the reality of what happened, and so that's kind of what I'm more interested to see is the reality of those numbers come in. I hope ultimately that larger tax that we gave them in the beginning of the session will show that ultimately there is a decrease in collections. Same with the reduction in the corporate taxes that was passed as well. But it's just one of those things we'll have to see. And, and of course, you can't measure just on collections. You need to understand how the population changes. If we get more people coming into the state and so our collections go up, great.
Correct.
But I think by that same notion, though, if anything, that means that gives us an opportunity to cut taxes even more. There was a bill by, I believe it was Representative Ladyman, to do a study about reducing sales tax. We want a high sales tax. And say, task force to see more cuts we can do. But, in my opinion, is I think we should have done that instead to look at reducing income tax. And we're sandwiched in between Tennessee and Texas, which don't have state income taxes. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who have said, I'm thinking about moving to this state because I don't have to pay income tax. Or they say, I've got a job that lets me work remote. I love living in Arkansas because my family's here, but I can go move to Dallas or I can go move to Nashville, not pay state income tax.
Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
You know, as someone who's watching the People's Checkbook, I'm thinking, why are you giving $1 million to another government organization that already gets millions of dollars from the state already?
Yeah.
You know, and so things like that just, you know, they don't make me feel good about giving a blank check to an organization and just saying, you know, here, tax the people some more and do what you say you're going to do without a lot of, I think, restraints on what they can do. And then, too, I mean, just a very solid evaluation of what exactly do you need. I mean, and so that's kind of how I got to my no vote and why I felt like I just didn't feel that at the time it was a prudent decision to make. So.
Well, I think that's a really good explanation. And while we're on the tax situation, you know, you also voted for the $95 million tax cut, which was a standalone bill moving us from 6.9% to 5.9% over the next couple of years. That was a good bill. That was early in the session, really good sign of unity. But then you did have these other bills. You voted against them, but they did pass, and so it's more money coming out of people's pockets. So I'm curious, Aaron, as to your opinion on when it's all said and done. Do you think that when it's all said and done, this is going to be a net tax increase on the people after the session as opposed to before the session?
Well, I would hopefully it's been a net decrease, and I haven't seen the latest numbers from DFNA yet, because yeah, there's always the projection, and then there's the reality of what happened, and so.
So in olden days, a glimpse of stocking was looked on as something shocking, but now God knows anything goes. Good authors too, who once knew better words, now only use 4-letter words, writing prose. Anything goes. The world's gone mad today. Good's bad today. Black's white today. Day's night today. Anyway. Times have changed. Joe Biden has now decided to no longer support the Hyde Amendment. That said, the Hyde Amendment, Joe, is a federal amendment that's kind of... It's kind of bogus anyway. They get around it. But it says, you know, that federal funds don't need to be used to fund abortion. Which is ridiculous because federal funds go to fund Planned Parenthood. You get the point. But Biden said that although he supported the Hyde Amendment in the past, he's realized that times have changed. For many years as U.S. Senator, I have supported the Hyde Amendment like many, many others have. He said that the efforts by states to cut abortion funding for abortion mills like Planned Parenthood made it clear that some women would need federal assistance to get abortions. I've been struggling with the problems that Hyde now presents, he said. If I believe that health care is a right, as I do, I can no longer support that amendment that makes the right dependent on someone's zip code. Let's see. Folks, times have changed. I don't think these guys are going to let up. Biden waffled on the Hyde Amendment earlier this week as his campaign stated that he continued to support the... So he's faced all of this criticism all throughout the week. You support the Hyde Amendment. How dare you? You know, yada, yada, yada. And now he comes out and he says, man, I'm telling you, he's going to have to, he's apparently the sensible one, is what people think of Joe Biden until you go to joebiden.info, the fake parody campaign website that actually has many of the GIFs and videos of him making young girls feel very uncomfortable. Go watch them for yourselves. Don't take my word for it. you'll be horrified at Uncle Creepy Joe. But there are some that won't. There's some that hear me say that and say, oh, Paul, what are you doing? There's no, Joe Biden's a great guy. It's because you want to believe in great people. There's nothing wrong with that, but you just need to make sure you're not being duped. Go to joebiden.info and check out that fake it's a parody campaign website. It's meant in comedy, but you can't deny it's satirical in essence. It's trying to bring you aware of what there's just something not right about it. Just go check for yourself. Go check for yourself. In the meantime, it's now politically advantageous, just like it was politically advantageous for Barack Obama to be against gay marriage, and then when the time came he was for gay marriage. He had evolved. It used to be politically advantageous for a Democrat to be for the Hyde Amendment, banning abortions or banning federal funds for abortions. And now it's politically advantageous because the left has gotten so far to the left and radical on human life. Now we can be for federal funds